This is America, and here President Trump's words don't just carry weight, they move markets. But how does that market volatility and fluctuating energy prices drive President's strategy when it comes to the war in Iran? I'll be back a little later in the program as we explore that question. But to start us off, here's Anna Burns-Francis.
Thanks, Manny. Yes, one man's social media posts can cause market chaos. But how does it impact the war in Iran? In a moment, we'll be joined by our chief US correspondent, Alan Fisher at the White House, and Kristen Salumi is live for us in New York. The US and Iran have been barely on speaking terms. Now it's been announced there's a truce, at least if you believe Donald Trump. And it appears many do. The S&P, Dow Jones and NASDAQ all rising off the back of the news. Not a bad result for a man whose love of the money market is well known.
Under our administration, growth is exploding, productivity is soaring, investment is booming, incomes are rising, inflation is defeated.
The U.S. economy remains strong. We had a strong economy thanks to you.
I think we have the best economy maybe we've ever had. But again, I mean, to me, the big news, 50,000, the Dow hit.
The Dow is over 50,000 right now. The S&P at almost 7,000, and the NASDAQ smashing records.
Yes, even members of his administration share his passion for the economy. But it's how politics and profit are playing out with the war in Iran that's causing some eyebrows to rise. Well-timed trades, weekend announcements and declarations of peace to allay market fears have some lawmakers alleging straight-out market manipulation. Based on what evidence? Well, they say, take a look at the price of oil. It was late February when the US and Israel launched its military campaign against Tehran. On Saturday, March 21st, the US president issued Iran with an ultimatum, warning his military would obliterate Iran's power plants if the Strait of Hormuz wasn't fully opened. But before trading could resume, on the next Monday morning, Trump announced a 5-day pause on strikes against energy sites. And this led to a rebound in global markets and a 13% drop in oil prices. Then on Thursday, he announced a 10-day extension. Oil prices went up again on Friday, this time by 4%. But early on Wednesday, it was down again by nearly 4%. The price of oil is, of course, constantly in a state of flux, especially during a war being carried out in an area relied upon for its production of that very product. It's no surprise then that the president is taking a keen interest in it. Let's go now to our chief US correspondent, Alan Fisher, who joins us from the White House. Alan, the president loves the stock market and he's known for his love of Truth Social. So how's he been reacting to these market changes?
Well, Donald Trump has always conflated the stock market with the economy, and that's simply not the case. Even though the stock market can be doing well, it doesn't mean that the economy is doing well. Presidents move markets. That's always been the case. And Donald Trump can do that more perhaps than any other president because of his love of social media. He posts on there more than any other president has. And that suggests that he knows something that the rest of us don't. And people always like to jump on that. Now, as you say, critics have been very critical of this approach. They say what he's doing is enriching friends and family because they know what he's going to send out next and they're able to get an advanced position on the market. But his supporters say all he's doing is being transparent with the American people, reaching a level that no one has ever done before. Here's the problem for Donald Trump. With all the positive messages that he puts out on social media about the economy doing well, people still aren't feeling it. There's a new poll out, even today, that says that his approval for handling the economy is at its lowest point ever. In fact, it's in Jimmy Carter realms, and that is really critical for Donald Trump. He's often criticised Jimmy Carter in the past. Now, he can keep putting out positive messages, and he can talk about how this is going to be a very short war, but people aren't feeling the benefits. And until that happens, they'll always be wary of what Donald Trump puts on the social media when it comes to the economy.
Thanks, Alan. All right, let's go to Kristen Salumi, who's live for us in New York. Kristen, the president announcing a truce with Iran. How did the markets react?
Markets have responded favorably here at the New York Stock Exchange. On the opening bell, we saw stocks rise and oil prices fall, continuing a trend that started on Tuesday when all three of the major averages had their biggest single-day gains in almost a year. And that was after President Donald Trump said that he would be willing to end the war without fully reopening the Strait of Hormuz. So what we've been seeing is extreme market volatility here at the stock exchange, with traders reacting to every headline when the conflict looks like it's about to be wrapping up. They buy, and when it looks like it's heating up, they sell. And certainly now it appears that traders are anticipating some good news from President Donald Trump when he speaks on Wednesday evening in that national address.
Yeah, Kristen, as Alan just pointed out, social media postings crossing over with the stock market are a common theme for the president. So how has that played out during the war?
Well, what the markets do on any given day tends to grab the headlines. Either they're up or they're down, but it's really important to kind of pull back and look at the overall trend. And while markets have been avoiding big one-day drops, the trend overall has been negative. As I just mentioned, Tuesday saw the biggest single-day gain for all three of the major averages here in the United States, but it was also the last day of March, which overall was a losing month. And in fact, for the last 3 months, all of the major averages have been on a losing streak. And so throughout the presidency, we've seen President Trump using the stock market as a barometer of his policies, domestic policies and foreign policies alike, so much so that his announcements seem to be timed to make the market happy. And again, that may be why we are seeing investors respond favorably in the run-up to this announcement that President Donald Trump is planning for Wednesday night.
As a president who built a political career on his reputation as a businessman, Donald Trump has long pointed to growing markets as evidence of successful policies.
I hit 50,000 on the Dow. We've had the best stock market in history. 53 all-time record highs since the election.
His desire not to upset markets, resulting in a predictable pattern when it comes to waging war. Make the most disruptive moves on the weekend when markets are closed. In the early hours of Saturday, January 3rd, for example, Trump launched the military raid that kidnapped Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro. Then on another Saturday, February 28th, the U.S. and Israel began their joint war on Iran. 3 weekends later, Trump issued his 48-hour ultimatum, threatening to obliterate Iran's power plants. Market futures fell dramatically, but then surged when he extended the deadline and claimed negotiations were underway just before the opening bell on Monday morning.
It's our declaration of economic independence.
Investors first began to notice Trump's tactics when he was negotiating tariffs, backing off his biggest threats when markets reacted negatively.
I mean, that's something to be proud of.
Financial Times journalist Robert Armstrong coined the term taco, short for Trump always chickens out.
That Trump's appetite for pain, or his tolerance for pain, either from the market or from the body politic, is pretty weak. So he is very attuned to what the stock and bond markets are doing. He's very attuned to opinion polls and very prepared to change his position when either of those things are sending him a message.
The White House, however, insists national security remains the driver of the president's decisions.
Despite Donald Trump's tactics, we've seen overall a downward trend in the markets here on Wall Street. And economists are warning that the longer energy supplies and shipping is disrupted in the Strait of Hormuz, the greater the impact will be on Main Street as well. Kristen Salimi, Al Jazeera, New York.
Well, Donald Trump loves the stock market and frequently uses it as a measure of his success. But is it a tactic that works? Here to discuss is Mark Feifley, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President George W. Bush, and Paulo von Schirach, President of the Global Policy Institute. Thank you both for joining me today. Paulo, can I put this to you? And I wonder if it's not one or the other, but maybe a little bit of both. Is there an element here that it is a deliberate action to influence some decision-making, but also a reaction to what is happening on stock markets often.
Absolutely. If there's one thing that seems that Mr. Trump pays attention to, is the market. Remember the announcement on Liberation Day, everybody ran for the hills, and they said, no, maybe we can do this later in installments, etc., because it was the stock market, the bond market, and maybe the Secretary of the Treasury told him, you know what, this is going to be not so good for the overall economy and for your standing, Mr. President, and your favorables. So I don't know. I agree with what's been just said. This is not what's driving this war. But clearly, the timing is not accidental. Yesterday, he made this announcement that essentially we won. We have achieved all we wanted to achieve, forgetting about unconditional surrender, regime change, Hormuz, nothing. We have destroyed, the president said, terminally, the Iranian nuclear program, and we're going to go out. Not exactly tomorrow, but we're winding down. And the market shoots up. And of course, he did it before the market closed. So you say, hey, this is a hooray for President Trump. What a genius decision, not considering how far down the market is compared to the beginning of the hostilities. So I don't think that this is all about that, about market manipulation. But there is some element to it, and I am quite sure that there are some people who have benefited. And keep in mind, nobody's checking on anything. The SEC is not checking on anything. The Department of Justice is not checking on anything. So I'm sure there are some people who, of course, I say this.
It's not a new criticism, to be fair, either. At the same time, when we talk about is this reactive or proactive, President Trump has frequently suggested he's highly attuned not just to the markets, but watching how the public is reacting to their rise and fall. Take a look at this clip from this time last year during the tariffs debacle. First they were on and then they were off.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, they were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents, they wouldn't have done it. And it had to be done. What was happening to us on trade, not only with, if you look at it, not only with China, but China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but somebody had to do it. They had to stop because it was not sustainable.
So is that a reliable strategy, Mark, as president, to be thinking so much on the minutiae moves that you see and reacting and deciding your next move based on a very gentle but very frequent rise and fall in stock markets?
So I think that is quite dangerous. And to have different messages at different times that are not being heard or that are not resonating, I think is the challenge. So you have a president who, over the last several months, of course, has put many of potential U.S. allies and former U.S. allies into a very difficult position, saying that we're going to increase tariffs. Now we're not going to. Now we're going to come up with a deal. Now we're going to take over Greenland. Now we want you to be part of this really difficult move in the Strait of Hormuz, where you help us by bringing your naval assets with no warning and no oversight to now be part of this this effort to keep the flow of oil tankers through the strait. They are being put through a difficult situation right now. Our allies, or former allies, or hopefully future allies. And the thing is that the other thing that Donald Trump is looking at, the other statistic, is his approval ratings, which are probably as low as any president in recent memory at this time of their presidency, at about somewhere in the 30%. And that means that coming in November is going to be the one time when there is going to be an investigation of sorts. And that's going to be the people are going to go into a ballot box and pick probably a Democratic majority, potentially, in both houses, or at least one house. And that's going to take a lot of Mr. Trump's ability to run this type of operation with the way that he's doing it right now. It's going to be more oversight from Congress. So he has to do things right now as much as possible, because I think that could come to an end.
And this is obviously what he thinks is the right thing to do, Paolo. And I'm wondering, is there a lack of a safeguard or a rail here in the people that he has around him and his team saying, maybe don't post that, or let's approach that differently in messaging?
I have no idea how. Look, many people who've been in this White House says there is no process. There's no decision-making process. It's not that the president acts after having heard different opinions, and then there's an interagency deliberation, and then somebody brings him, okay, there's option A, option B. No, things are done haphazardly. That's what we hear. We're not there present. But look, your former employer, the NSC advisor, there's nothing there. It's gone. The NSC staff is gone. I mean, there is no interagency process anymore. It is whatever the president decides to do at any point of the day or night. And we've seen the changes that can be sudden. And by the way, regarding signaling to markets, you have to pay some attention to that, because if you keep saying things, anticipating policy that doesn't happen, there will be a point in which markets will discount this. So, okay, this is another thing from Trump. It's not going to happen, and therefore we're not going to move our positions based on what we believe that should happen, considering what he just said. If he changes his mind, well, we're rolling it all back. Again, the assumption now is that we're out, we've won. And the rest, let somebody else take care of it. Strait of Hormuz, not our problem. Change of regime in Iran, well, not now. So there we go.
I wanted to talk about that, actually, about this concept that actually, as much as the president can post on social media or make these statements, it's the market's choice to move on those proclamations. Should there be, Mark, do you think, I will use the word responsibility, but to assess that information before doing this chaotic up and down move all the time? The president's approach to this is no surprise.
Yeah, this is the way he's been his entire adult life, is kind of flying by the seat of his pants. His fans will say that he's completely transparent. This is a man who puts on social media exactly what's on his mind. He doesn't pull any punches. The difficulty with having that in your system is it brings chaos and it brings a level of dysfunction at the same time. The military campaign in Iran has been about as effective as it possibly can. You know, the Iranian economy is decimated. Their military is devastated. They are diplomatically isolated. But it's that confusion and that difficulty that the American people, the enemy, and our allies have at trying to keep track of all these things that are going on in real time. What is our end state? What are we looking to do? What is our strategy? How are we going to bring 20% of the world's oil that moves through this strait to market in the weeks ahead? And those are answers that we might get tonight, or we might be waiting afterwards for more information so we can actually figure this out. Or the challenge is that the global economy right now is in a very difficult spot. We are seeing oil prices at about $100 per barrel. They've increased about 30%. That's going to have a long range effect on this economy in the weeks and the months ahead. We're going to see rising prices that happen for some time because of this. And the hope is that at tonight's address to the nation, that Trump answers some of these questions in a way that makes sense both to the markets, to our allies, and to our enemies, so that we get through this successfully.
Speaking of the economy, the president's made much of his achievements to grow the wider economy. His Treasury Secretary going so far as to say the rise and fall in oil prices in particular wasn't going to have any impact.
The economy you vitalized through your pro-growth policies is well positioned to withstand these temporary disruptions. The United States dollar has reasserted itself as a safe haven asset. The U.S. dollar has appreciated since the hostilities began because everyone knows, thanks to your efforts, the U.S. economy is the best position in the world and capital is flowing in.
So, Paolo, as our chief US correspondent Alan Fisher pointed out before, the stock market is not the economy, although the two are frequently conflated. So in this case, the US economy is absolutely enormous and is built to weather relatively large storms. Is this administration or this period of conflict in Iran just another storm the US economy has to weather?
Yes, indeed. And again, what we don't know here is how long this crisis, and I'm referring to the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, will last. If the straits are reopened tomorrow, well, we can say, okay, it was a bad moment, but we will weather this. It's not terrifying. The thing is this: at the moment, look at the markets in Asia, Japan, Korea. It looks really dire. And at the moment, what they are experiencing is a price increase. What about if there is a supply disruption? Meaning, whatever you pay for oil and gas, it's just not there. We don't have it. We can sell it to you because it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Well, then you start seeing things that we probably have not calculated for. And again, I don't know what the president can say tonight, and I'm sure, I guess my gut feeling here is he will declare victory and say we have accomplished our goals. But as been said a million times now, the other side has a voice. And let's understand this. Wars end when somebody says, I lost, not when somebody says, I won. And to the extent that the Iranians want to extract, and I think they will, some kind of ransom, say, you want passing through the Strait of Hormuz? Well, there's a toll booth right here. We need a few $1 million per tanker because, we got to reconstruct the country. So you pay if you want to go through. That's a possibility.
Mark, I want to give you just quickly the final word here because, of course, all this talk of the economy and stock markets and public reaction, none of that or all of that will matter in just a few months, as you pointed out, when it comes to the midterms. This period seems to be about offering some reassurance of the state of things.
I think that's right. When Donald Trump won this past election, pretty overwhelmingly, it was because he was going to keep prices low, he was going to keep inflation low, he was going to grow the job market, and ideally, and one thing that he talked about repeatedly was low gas prices. So he needs to do everything he can to stop this war, free up the Strait of Hormuz, and get this market going in a positive way. I think Scott Bassett, I think he's a reassuring person as Secretary of Treasury, but I think at the same time, there's only so much that because this storm is a man-made storm by one man, and only he can stop it and bring some level of prosperity in the future.
Mark, Paolo, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. Of course, it's not just investors watching these market movements so closely, it's also the media. Let's head back to Manny in the newsroom to have a look at how it's playing out in the US.
This is the pattern that's emerging across the U.S. news media. It's about how President Trump is handling the war in Iran, because it's not just being tracked by military analysts, it's being tracked by the markets. Let's head over to Bloomberg to kick this off. This is financial reporter Anna Edwards.
And we do seem to be caught in the art of the deal here, don't we? I mean, we're just getting so many different signals coming out of the White House.
And those mixed signals are President Trump saying one day that the conflict with Iran is almost over, and then the next day threatening escalation. Let's head over to the Associated Press with this headline. Trump's go-to moves to influence the markets are increasingly falling flat as the Iran war drags on. That reporting goes on to say that as the messaging to calm markets with false reassurances is having diminishing credibility in financial markets, so too has Trump's diminished public confidence. Now, this theme of diminishing confidence is definitely prevalent across the media sphere. This is former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki on MS Now.
You see, Trump has gotten used to the idea that he can make big, disastrous decisions and just reverse himself when he thinks things get out of control, when he sees people don't like it necessarily. I mean, we all watched him do it over and over again with his tariffs, threatening steep duties on imports, watching the markets crash, and then walking it all back.
And here's the Washington Post's Josh Rogan on CNN talking about how Trump's changing rhetoric is doing more than just influencing markets.
You can say that he was doing this to soothe the markets. Another way to say that is that he's doing this to manipulate the markets.
Now, to be fair, there are many others who are rallying around the Trump administration, framing much of the news media's focus on President Trump's sometimes contradictory language as unfair nitpicking. Let's head over to Fox Business. This is anchor Dagan McDowell.
I'm not reading into what President Trump says publicly because there's a method to his public presentation very often, and he is 10 steps ahead.
So what's the story coming out of the U.S. media here? This is a case of a U.S. president whose messaging moves markets, a conflict that is driving up energy costs, and a wartime strategy that, depending on who you ask, is either carefully calibrated or increasingly unpredictable.
That's all from the team here in Washington, D.C. Let's hand back to Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha.